Ever walk into a place and feel like you just stepped through a time portal? Well, grab your bell-bottoms and your mood ring, because we're about to take a groovy trip across America to 10 towns where disco never died, wood paneling is still cool, and the 70s are alive and well. If you love a good dose of nostalgia, hit that subscribe button right now, because you're not going to want to miss this far-out journey. Let's kick things off in Marfa, Texas. Now, you might be wondering what a tiny desert town in West Texas has to do with the 70s. But hear me out. Marfa peaked as an artistic haven in the 70s when minimalist artist Donald Judd rolled into town and turned abandoned military buildings into art installations. The whole vibe froze right there. That walking down Highland Avenue feels like stumbling onto the set of a Wim Wenders film from that era. The minimalist concrete art boxes, the dusty streets, the old-school diners with their original Formica countertops. Even the famous Marfa lights have been mystifying visitors since way before the 70s, but they became a cultural touchstone in that decade. The local watering holes still have that unchanged authenticity. No corporate chains here, just raw, unfiltered West Texas the way it looked when your parents were young. The vintage storefronts haven't been renovated into something trendy, they're just genuinely old. Time didn't stop here on purpose. It just decided Marfa was groovy enough already. Next up is Centralia, Pennsylvania, and this one's a bit darker. Centralia became a 70s time capsule in the most literal way possible, because in 1962, a coal mine fire started beneath the town. But it was during the 70s that everything really went sideways. The government tried to fix it. They failed. By the late 70s and early 80s, people started abandoning their homes. What's left is frozen in that exact era. Cracked streets with smoke still rising from beneath. 70s-era ranch houses sitting empty with their harvest gold appliances still inside. Overgrown yards with rusted swing sets from that decade slowly being reclaimed by nature. Walking through Centralia is like exploring a disco-era Pompeii. The few remaining residents live in homes that haven't been updated since Carter was president. It's eerie, melancholic, and absolutely stuck in time. The whole town is a monument to what happens when progress just gives up and walks away. Now let's head somewhere a little more cheerful. Ocean City, Maryland. Specifically, the Boardwalk area. While parts of Ocean City have modernized, there's a stretch of this classic beach town that's pure 70s summer vacation energy. The original Trimpers Rides amusement park has been there since way before the 70s, but its glory days were absolutely that decade. The rides look like they haven't been updated since. We're talking about those old-school attractions with peeling paint and mechanical parts that clunk and groan. The arcades still have skee-ball and those creepy fortune-teller machines. Dola's Candyland has the same vintage signage, pumping out saltwater taffy like it's still 1975. The smell of Thrasher's fries hangs in the salt air exactly like it did back then. Even the mini golf courses have that specific aesthetic with the faded pastel colors and concrete decorations. Sure, there are newer elements mixed in, but the soul of this boardwalk is absolutely 70s family vacation. You half expect to see someone in tube socks and short shorts walking by with a transistor radio. Let's swing over to Gibsonton, Florida, also known as Gibtown. This is where carnival workers traditionally spent their winters, and it became a sideshow community in the mid-20th century. But it really cemented its identity in the 60s and 70s when it was in full swing. Here's the thing about Gibtown. It never evolved past that era. The old carnival memorabilia is everywhere. Our vintage trailers that housed performers still dot the landscape. The famous Giant's Camp restaurant is long closed now, but the spirit remains. Local businesses still have that worn-down roadside attraction feel with hand-painted signs and architecture that screams Nixon administration. The zoning laws were famously relaxed to accommodate exotic animals and carnival equipment, so you get this wonderfully weird mix of residential and sideshow that feels plucked from another time. The whole town has this beautiful decay, like a Polaroid left in the sun too long. Gibtown doesn't try to be retro. It just never got the memo that times changed. Time to head to the Midwest. Branson, Missouri might seem like it's evolved, but scratch the surface and it's a 70s variety show that never ended. Branson exploded as a tourist destination in the late 60s and 70s with country music shows and family entertainment. That DNA is still completely dominant. The theaters still book the same style of acts. We're talking variety shows with singers, comedians, and dancers all in one package. The architecture is stuck in that era of big signs and rustic lodge aesthetics. Silver Dollar City theme park nearby leans into frontier nostalgia, but was built up significantly in the 70s and maintains that specific vision of Americana. The Strip itself feels like Vegas's country cousin from 40 years ago. Buffets everywhere, motels with their original signs, gift shops selling the same kind of mass-produced Americana tchotchkes your grandma bought on vacation. While even the newer editions try to match that old-school vibe, because that's what Branson is. It's a living museum of family vacation entertainment from the me decade. Let's cruise up to the Catskills in New York. This region was the ultimate vacation destination for decades, peaking in the 50s through 70s, and then it just kind of froze when people stopped coming. Towns like South Fallsburg and Liberty are filled with the remnants of the Borscht Belt glory days. Abandoned resort hotels with their 70s geometric architecture slowly crumbling. The ones still operating often look exactly like they did back then. We're talking shag carpeting, wood paneling, vintage furniture that was never replaced because why bother? The small downtown areas have storefronts that closed in the 80s and simply never reopened. Faded signs advertising businesses long gone. Diners that still serve the same menu items on the same plates. There's a melancholy beauty to it all. These towns aren't trying to be retro-themed. They're genuinely preserved by economic decline. Walking through them is like flipping through your parents' old vacation photos, except you're actually there inside the image. Now we're heading west to Barstow, California. This Mojave desert town became a Route 66 and interstate highway stop, and it's been coasting on that identity ever since its heyday in the 60s and 70s. Main Street is lined with vintage motels and diners that have seen better days but still operate with their original bones intact. The signage is incredible. Big, bold, neon or non-functional neon with that classic desert roadside aesthetic. The Route 66. Mother Road Museum celebrates this era specifically. But beyond the intentional nostalgia, the whole town just feels stuck. Fast food joints from the 70s that are now regional relics. Gas stations with architecture from that era. Even the residential areas have that specific Southern California desert development look from 40 to 50 years ago. Lots of single-story ranch homes with rock yards and carports. Barstow exists in this weird limbo where it knows it's a historic stop but can't quite move forward, so everything stays suspended in this time warp of faded glory. Let's roll into Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, the alien town. While the UFO incident happened in 1947, Roswell's tourist identity really crystallized in the 70s when UFO culture exploded. The town leaned hard into this and then just never updated the approach. The alien-themed businesses have this vintage roadside attraction quality. Hand-painted murals that are clearly decades old. Kitschy gift shops that look like they were decorated once in the late 70s and left alone. The International UFO Museum occupies an old movie theater and has that exact energy of a 70s-era roadside museum. Lots of laminated newspaper clippings and dioramas behind glass. Even the chain restaurants in Roswell try to maintain the alien theme with retro-looking signs and decorations. The residential parts of town are classic southwestern stucco and adobe styles from that era. It's like the whole town decided their brand was set in stone 40 years ago, and changing anything would break the spell. Up next is Donora, Pennsylvania. And this former steel mill town had its heyday long before the 70s, but it died during the 70s when the mills closed, and that's exactly when it froze. The main street is a perfect snapshot of a dying industrial town from that era. Storefronts with their original facades and signs, many empty. The architecture is working-class Pennsylvania. Brick buildings, narrow lots, everything practical and unadorned. Houses are modest post-war construction with the additions and modifications people made in the 60s and 70s still visible. Aluminum awnings, enclosed porches with jalousie windows, carports with corrugated fiberglass roofs. The few businesses still operating often have interiors that haven't changed in decades. Old cash registers, vintage product displays, handwritten price signs. Donora isn't quaint or charming in a deliberate way. It's simply a town where economic collapse meant nothing new was ever built or renovated. What you see is authentic decay, a community suspended at the exact moment its purpose disappeared. Finally, we arrive in Slab City, California. This is the most extreme example on our list. Slab City is an off-grid community built on the concrete slabs of a former Marine base that was decommissioned after World War II. But it became a countercultural destination in the 60s and 70s, and that culture never left. Snowbirds, artists, drifters, and folks opting out of mainstream society live here in RVs and makeshift structures. The whole place has this raw desert hippie vibe that's pure 70s. Salvation Mountain, the main attraction. Island was started in the 80s but channels that era's folk art energy completely. There's no running water, no electricity, unless you generate it yourself. No rules, no rent. People live in vintage trailers and school buses that literally are from the 70s. The social structure is informal and communal in ways that echo that decade's alternative lifestyle movements. Visiting Slab City is like entering a living time capsule of countercultural idealism mixed with survivalist reality. It's not for everyone, but it's absolutely and authentically frozen in the spirit of a very specific American moment. So there you have it. 10 American towns where the 70s never really ended. Some are preserved by poverty, some by pride, some by sheer stubborn personality. Whether it's the art scene in Marfa, the tragic fire in Centralia, the boardwalk nostalgia of Ocean City, the carnival history of Gibsonton, the variety show persistence of Branson, the faded resort glory of the Catskills, the highway stop identity of Barstow, the alien kitsch of Roswell, the industrial decline of Donora, or the off-grid counterculture of Slab City. Each of these places offers a window into a decade that shaped modern America. They remind us that not everywhere moves at the same speed, and sometimes that's exactly what makes them special. If you enjoyed this groovy journey through time, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next adventure. Until then, keep it far out. What's really fascinating about these places is understanding why they've resisted the relentless march of modernization that's transformed so many other American towns. Well, it's not just nostalgia or a lack of resources, though those factors definitely play a role. There's something deeper happening here. These communities have developed an identity so intrinsically linked to a specific moment in time that change would feel like erasing their own story. The 70s weren't just a decade to them, it was the moment their towns mattered most, when they had purpose, vitality, and a reason for people to care about them. Letting that go would mean admitting that their best days have passed, and that's a psychological hurdle many communities just can't bring themselves to cross. Think about what the 70s represented culturally. It was a time of incredible experimentation and individuality before everything became homogenized by corporate consolidation and internet culture. It was when roadside attractions still felt genuinely weird and unexpected. When families took vacations to actual destinations instead of sanitized theme parks, when small towns could have their own unique personality without instantly being compared to thousands of similar places online. The 70s had a grit and an authenticity that we're all desperately trying to recapture now through expensive nostalgia products and themed restaurants. But these towns have the real thing. They're living museums, not because they're trying to be, but because they simply are. The economic side of this story is important too. These communities didn't freeze in the 70s because of some master plan. Most of them froze because they got left behind by larger economic trends. When highway systems changed, when industries relocated, when people started shopping at big box stores instead of local shops, these towns lost their reason to reinvent themselves. Investment dried up. Young people moved away. The resources and incentive to modernize just disappeared. What might have been viewed as decline and loss has accidentally become their greatest asset. The very fact that nothing changed means everything is still there to see. You can walk through these places and experience urban and architectural history in a way that's almost impossible anywhere else. There's also something to be said about the human desire for authenticity in an increasingly fake world. We're surrounded by carefully curated social media content, brand experiences designed by marketing consultants, and entertainment engineered for maximum engagement. Walking through these 70s time capsules offers something genuinely different. You're experiencing real spaces where real people made real choices about how to live and work. There's no corporate overlay, no Instagram filter, no hidden marketing agenda. Just genuine decay, genuine history, and genuine stories written into the landscape. That kind of unmediated reality is becoming rarer and more valuable every year. Some of these towns are starting to recognize their value and are cautiously leaning into their 70s identity as a tourism angle. Barstow has embraced Route 66 nostalgia explicitly. Roswell has built its entire modern economy around alien tourism. But the most interesting ones are the ones doing this almost unconsciously. They're not trying to be retro destinations, they're just being themselves. And that authenticity is what makes them compelling. The moment a town starts performing its nostalgia self-consciously, some of the magic gets lost. It becomes a theme park version of history rather than actual history. For travelers and history enthusiasts, these destinations offer something that carefully preserved historical sites often don't. Historic villages and restored colonial towns feel sterile and reconstructed because they often are. But a town that's just been quietly existing in the same way for 40 or 50 years? That's the real deal. You can feel the decades in the walls. You can see exactly how people in the 70s approached problems and designed their spaces. You can understand what life was actually like when you're standing in a diner that still has the exact menu boards, the same vinyl booths, and staff who might have been working there since the Ford administration. The environmental aspect of this is worth considering too. These frozen towns are accidentally practicing sustainable living. Instead of tearing down buildings and constructing new ones, instead of constantly upgrading and replacing and consuming, these communities are maintaining what already exists. Sure, it's not intentional environmentalism. It's born from economic necessity. But the result is the same. Less waste, less resource consumption, less energy spent on constant construction and demolition. In a weird way, these supposedly backward, stuck-in-the-past communities are living more sustainably than many modern towns obsessed with the latest technologies and trendiest architecture. There's also a growing movement of people who are intentionally seeking out these places. Urban explorers, photographers, filmmakers, and artists are drawn to the authentic decay and the stories these landscapes tell. Independent films have been shot in these locations because the production designers don't need to do much work. The locations are already perfectly realized 70s sets. Instagram accounts dedicated to vintage Americana have millions of followers hungry for exactly this kind of content. What was once just the sad aftermath of economic decline is being revalued as cultural heritage and artistic inspiration. It's a strange inversion where the thing that made these places seem like failures is now making them seem like treasures. Of course, this newfound interest brings its own challenges. As more people discover these places and more tourism dollars flow in, there's a risk that they'll change. A small town that's been quietly existing for decades might suddenly decide to capitalize on its newfound status and start gentrifying, renovating, and modernizing to cater to visitors. That would be the ultimate tragedy. The thing that made these places special would be destroyed in the process of trying to preserve it. Some of these communities are navigating this tension carefully, embracing tourism without losing their authentic character. Others haven't had to face this choice yet, but eventually, success might be these towns' undoing. It's also worth acknowledging that living in these frozen 70s communities isn't actually romantic if you're the person living there year-round. The lack of economic opportunity, the aging infrastructure, the limited access to modern services and conveniences, these are real hardships for residents. We outsiders can romanticize the vintage charm while we visit and take photographs, then leave to return to our climate-controlled homes with reliable internet and access to any product we could want. The people who actually live in these towns often don't have the choice to leave. They make do with what exists because moving away isn't economically feasible. The nostalgia we're celebrating is built on the foundation of other people's limited options. That said, many residents of these communities are genuinely proud of their towns and their history. They understand the unique value of what they have. They're not suffering through the 70s out of obligation. They're choosing to maintain their communities the way they are because it matters to them. That pride and intentionality is part of what makes these places work. A town that's stuck in the 70s against the will of its residents would just feel depressing. But a town where people actively choose to preserve that identity, even in the face of outside pressure to modernize, that's genuinely special. It's a small act of rebellion against the relentless uniformity of corporate capitalism. What these 10 towns ultimately represent is resistance to the idea that newer is always better, that progress is always improvement, and that every place should look and feel like every other place. They're saying that value can be found in preservation, that history matters, and that sometimes slowing down or staying still is a valid choice. In a world that's constantly pushing us toward the next big thing, toward constant upgrading and optimization and consumption, these 70s time capsules offer a different perspective. They suggest that maybe we don't have to abandon everything that came before. Maybe we can find ways to honor our past while still moving forward. Maybe authenticity and history are worth more than shiny newness. Whether you're into 70s nostalgia or you just appreciate authentic Americana, these towns deserve your attention. They're not museums or attractions that have been professionally packaged for tourists. They're real communities with real stories, experiencing real existence in a way that most of us only read about or see in movies. They're living history lessons about American economic cycles, cultural trends, and the way places get left behind or deliberately choose to maintain their identity. They're beautiful in their decay, interesting in their stagnation, and absolutely worth the road trip if you get the chance to visit. Thanks so much for taking this groovy journey through these incredible time capsules with me today. If you want to explore more forgotten places, hidden histories, and the weird and wonderful corners of America that most people never get to see, definitely subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We've got so many more adventures coming up that I think you're really going to dig. See you next time, and keep exploring those far out corners of the country.